feel free to go to the Sky Garden. It's going to be recorded. Sorry, it's on the record. So welcome, everyone. I want to start off by acknowledging the territory that we're on tonight, which is the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I feel so grateful to be here in person, and I'm so lucky to be able to work and explore this land and live my authentic self day to day, and just really work towards my own commitments towards reconciliation. So on behalf of Pride at Work Canada, hi, I'm Claire Yick, welcome. My pronouns are she and her, and I've been on the board of directors for Pride at Work Canada in 2019. And our team has just grown and done so much great work since then, despite a little pandemic in the middle. And I just want to tell you a little bit about what we've done. So Pride at Work Canada seeks to empower employees to build workplaces that celebrate all employees, regardless of their gender expression, gender identity, or sexual orientation. So we do this through amazing events like this, as well as brain days, workshops, webinars, lots of great resources for folks to implement in their workplaces. We help create safer, more inclusive workplaces that realize the full potential of all employees while breaking down barriers for employment. So I'm really excited to have you all in the room today, and hopefully some of you are members and will be part of the Vancouver Ambassadors group that we're getting set up bi-monthly again. So we're here to celebrate this ProPride event. And before we get to all of that, we have some accessibility and community safety information. So we all have different stickers. They're kind of like a traffic light system. So just be mindful of folks that are wearing different colors. Green means handshakes and you're all good to go. I think it means yellow is elbows. And then red is maybe just approach with caution. So just please be mindful of the different colors and tags. Down tags as well. So that might be a little confusing. But yeah, thanks all for coming. There were some food and drinks provided earlier as well. We'll continue into the night, into the Sky Garden following this session. Yeah. Thank you for coming to this ProPride panel. Our events take place all across Turtle Island throughout the Pride season for ProPride, which means that our work takes place on the traditional territories, a lot of diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. This includes Two-Spirit and 2S LGBTQIA+. So we recognize that there's also multiple barriers that impact these communities, and we want to be able to allow these communities to access meaningful, affirming, and inclusive employment. So in our work, we're looking to reduce those barriers, as I mentioned earlier. So we'd really welcome feedback from any Indigenous workers, employers, job seekers, in making that a reality. Now, I'd like to thank Norton Rose Fulbright for their support for this event. So excited to be back here. Was last year in 2019. And as a former lawyer, it's nice to be in a law firm, but not worry about billable hours. So just, yeah, it feels nice being home. Today's panel is going to be focused on the experiences of the 2S LGBTQIA employees and job seekers. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention my own employer, the BC Public Service, where I work as a senior policy analyst on climate action. And really glad that our employer supports my diversity and inclusion goals and allow me time to come here today to chat with you all. So Pride this year in Vancouver, 44th year, and the theme is Together Again. This is very wholesome. It really highlights the excitement and the importance of gathering in person, like we are now, and putting a focus on community events. So we've come a long way, and I'm really thankful, and I feel super humble for all the people that have done the work for me. But there's still more work to be done, and I'm proud to be a part of that. And today we've assembled an amazing panel to explore Resurgence, which is really pulling together that Together Again theme, so we can return together and build more inclusive futures for gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation inclusion. So for our first speaker, I'm going to welcome up Saylesh Wesley, an educator and knowledge keeper. Saylesh Wesley is a Solo and Tsimshian teacher who graduated from UBC's Native Indigenous Teacher Program in May 1999. She taught with the Vancouver School District from 2000 to 2008 in both enrolling and non-enrolling support teaching positions. She completed her MEd in 2009 from UBC and in the 2007 Urban Learning Cohort. She's since taught many levels and now works for the Chilliwack School District. Her passion as an educator lies within the fields of Indigenous and LGBTQ two-spirit education. Please help me welcome Saylesh.
Is this where you'd like me to be? Yes, okay. They tell squalawell, qual squits lala, palaktanot tel squee, talitzal qua tel huyuk, casta musquium, casta kitsum calum. They tell squalawell, qual squits lala. I just shared with you that my traditional name is Palaktanot. I come from the Scout-Kale First Nation, which is in Chilliwack. My father is Tsimshian. He comes from the Kitsum-Kalem First Nation in Terrace, BC. And I have roots in Musqueam as well from my grandfather. It's just been quite the journey getting here now, given that this is our third year of 2020. And I am very, very intrigued and curious as to what 2023 will bring us. I think that a lot of us have learned a great deal about ourselves in these last few years. We've learned a great deal about probably a lot of the things that we didn't want to know about ourselves. Spending so much time up here in our own heads, right? And so for that reason, I invite everyone to drop your thoughts down into your heart. It's a beautiful thing to be able to breathe fully again. I know we're not out of the woods yet. I know that our numbers are still uncertain. I know that there is great uncertainty yet. But I believe that we will come through this. I believe that we all have the power of prayer, whatever that means for each and every one of you. I believe that when we have good intentions to reconcile in the biggest way, in ways beyond Canada and Indigenous Canada, to reconcile with each other, to reconcile with ourselves, and to remember why we have occasions like this, to celebrate pride, which lifts the people who need lifting the most. Inclusion has become such a big word, and if we're not careful, it will just become a word that we use over and over and over, like bureaucracy, rather than something that is sincere. When you have sincerity and when you use these terms carefully, thoughtfully, and meaningfully, you can find that connection with each other and within yourself. A connection between your mind, your body, and your spirit that will help you to remember why it is you're actually in this flesh right now. We probably don't think a lot about that. We probably don't dig deep enough within ourselves to ask, why am I here right now? Why am I Saylesh Wesley in this life? Why is it that I have been called to such a beautiful corporate building, way out of my element, to share some of my own spirit with all of you? It makes me think about the notion of decolonization, this critical time of reconciliation, the announcement of the 215 last May. We've come through so much with this pandemic, with all of the natural disasters that we've endured, the evils of war, mass shootings. It doesn't stop. I had to tell myself that I am not here just to suffer. I don't see suffering as something bad or evil. I see it as something that's put in front of us to teach us more about ourselves, to help us stay humble more than ever. That's why I invite you to come from your thoughts in your head down to your heart. This is the real us right here. That thinking brain that we have, I guess I associate that with our ego. We need it. It's like a calculator, you know. We use it for navigating the world and, I don't know, driving here when you live in Chilliwack. It's just a tool. But the real stuff, the good stuff, even all the painful stuff, that's all here. And that's what we leave with. We leave this behind. It's not necessary when we go wherever we're going to go. Our mental health certainly has tested us over and over and over. I should say that specifically about myself. Even right now, walking out in this smog, I'm not certain what it is, but it's like, I've always struggled with migraines. And I don't know if anybody here knows what migraine headaches are like. For me, I'm one of those ones that gets auras and then I'm blinded. And it happened literally just before I got here. And I had to persevere through it. And I thought, even the smog, I don't know if I looked at the light the wrong way. I'm not certain what it was, but it's my belief, my aspiration to continue being and loving and embracing and teaching. That helps me to push through. We've been pushing through for a few years now. That's why I have this intention of greeting 2023 with open arms, an open mind, and with nothing but hope. I know that, this human experience isn't perfect. I know 2023 will come with its own fair share of challenges, and perhaps it'll still be one and the same with 2020, just as the last couple of years have been. But we can't stop hoping. We can't stop believing. We can't stop knowing that we do need one another. I have a late uncle. He would always say, whenever he presented, he would always tell us, we are all good people. And he'd hold his hands up like this. What a beautiful thing to hear. In a corporate setting like this, it's very easy for us to forget our humanity, especially those good people that have to work here. You get used to this pace, you get used to this surrounding, you get used to this environment, you get used to the culture of a building like this. And it's very easy to forget why you're here. And so this brings me to share that loaded term of decolonization. Another term that I think that if we're not careful, it'll get overused to a point where it actually isn't authentic. It is problematic, depending on who's sharing the word or however they're using it. But for me, it just occurred to me that decolonization is sort of one and the same with inclusion. Indigenous people, I guess for us, the action is to remember who we were and to remember that we belong to this land, that we are stewards of this land, and the notion of ownership is a foreign concept. It isn't a very humble concept. And so I wonder, for good human beings like ourselves, I wonder what that would mean for us to get over ourselves a little bit more and to start thinking about this land the way my ancestors did. That includes a way of moving forward in a way that is like remembering that we are stewards of this land. Stewardship, being kind and loving and compassionate. Those are beautiful ways for anyone to decolonize. We've come a long way since our dark history. And that dark history continues to raise its ugly head. And yet, I will not let myself despair. My elders, my ancestors have done it for far too long. And so I guess that's why, I get called to events like this to share my insights, share bits of my spirits with all of you, so that you know that it isn't going to be an ongoing story. It is our history, and we're still in history right now. The 215 was only last year. And of course, that number is much bigger than that now. So I ask all of you, I implore all of you, especially those of you that have privilege, to use it accordingly with the spirit of stewardship in mind and in heart. It isn't just about our residential school survivors. It isn't just about reconciliation. It isn't just about embracing diversity like Pride at Work. It's about being human together, walking forward with one another, loving harder, with more intention, learning what it means to be compassionate. All of those things are self-determined. What it means for me to be kind and loving may not be the same for some of you. What it means for me to be compassionate may not be the same for you. But whatever channel or vibration you're able to sit in, whatever vibration or channel that you're able to ground yourself in that feels right for you, like you customize those things for what it means for you to be that. And have conversations with yourself every morning and every night. Was I kind today? Was I compassionate? Was I inclusive? Did my sharp tongue get the better of me? Did I make anybody feel bad? Did I dismiss anyone? Especially in critical environments such as this one. When you live in a corporate world, it's very easy to forget your humanity. It's the very reason that we're here. I don't know that I'm not necessarily fixed with any kind of faith or religion as well. I just follow my spirit. Whatever feels good, whatever looks good and sounds good to me is what I believe in. We're 18 floors up. This is not at all what I would consider comfortable. And I don't say that disrespectfully or negatively, but for the talk that I'm giving right now, the spirit that I would give it, the environment that I would give it would be moss under our feet. The smell of the woods. Beautiful spirits. The sound of a waterfall pouring through us on a hot day like today. Washing away our sadness, our sickness, and our sorrow. Helping us, helping us, helping us. How do we take this beautiful planet? Can even start smaller. How do we take this beautiful island we call Turtle Island now and make it better for future generations? This me culture hasn't worked. You know, now we're on to, let's try the us culture then, you know. And now we're even looking further. What are we leaving behind for our children? What are we leaving behind for our grandchildren? So I guess in the spirit of reconciliation and the 94 calls to action, you know, those terms, they're very politically loaded and it can cause a lot of tension. And I'm certain you've been in different crowds where you'll hear different perspectives, and some of them may not be very nice, but it's very important that you know them, that you hear them, that you feel them, because then you get to make a conscious decision as to how you use them and how it is that you would hope that your children continue to do. The elder that shared with me, that shared with the world, that we are all good people. He taught my family about the 7 laws of life. He talked about health. And in this instance, I guess mental health especially is so critical. It's certainly been an issue for so many people. But when you think about all of us in the margins, that mental health is multiplied, cubed many times over. Happiness, what does that even mean? What's the next law? I'm not certain what it means. I don't claim to be happy, not because I'm a negative or unhappy person. I just claim to be a human who has many flaws, and you know, I get to visit happiness every now and then. But I hope that those visits, my goal is to make those visits happen at will. My goal is to make those visits happen intentionally and demonstratively. The next law is generations. I spoke about that. What are we leaving behind? What did we learn from our elders? What have we learned from Canada's history? All the good and all of the bad. And how are we going to move forward so that we can continue to write history with more intention? Generosity. Not something that us humans, we're not very good with that. You know, as a teacher, we say that all the time. Sharing is caring. Hugs are free. Back to the basics. Humility. I can just breathe that one in. Humility. We're certainly not known for our humility. If I ever had an opportunity for some of you to meet some of my elders who are now beautiful spirits standing behind me, you would feel it, you would see it, you would soak it in, and I certainly hope it would permeate your own spirits. Because having humility is truly having power. Forgiveness. Here we are in a time of reconciliation. The Pope was just here. I hear and see all of my own family, my own people across Turtle Island speaking about that in a reactive way. I haven't looked at it yet. I haven't faced it yet because I do those things carefully. And I remind myself to do those things intentionally so that I'm driving into it with open eyes, knowing where I'm going and what it is, and going in with endeavors. I have been in pain my whole life. I know shame all too well. Trauma is one of my dear, close relatives. Grateful to those things. They've helped me to become who I am now. Those things have helped me to come to beautiful places like this where people believe the things that I say. So they've taught me a great deal. But they've also taught me what love is. They've taught me what compassion is. They've taught me what humility is. They've taught me what forgiveness is. The last law, understanding. We all are different from one another. I bet you we would shock each other if some of us knew who we really were behind closed doors. At the end of the day, what matters is that it shouldn't matter, right? I don't care to spend time with people who are violent. I don't care to spend time with people who enjoy the darkness. Some people are addicted to pain. And that pain comes out in many ways. Sometimes it's violence. Sometimes it's criminal. Other times it's just self-loathing. I understand that. I understand that. I haven't been there in ways that make me violent or dark or hateful, but I've certainly been there when it comes to the violence and the hate within. As an Indigenous trans woman who transitioned and came out in a time when it wasn't a time to do so, I know full well that this day, meetings like this are so very welcome. And I thank all of you for coming with open hearts and open minds. All of you. Some of the words I said, I don't know what it was, but it triggered lights. I could see them coming on. And it fills this room. Maybe we should dim our lights a little bit more because it's pretty hot in here. but I hope that grounds you. I hope that helps you to come out of your mind and into your heart so that you're able to participate and collaborate and love with more intention starting now. Lahai.
Thank you so much, Saylesh, for sharing from your heart. Let's take a deep breath. Also, crisis, the restart in the computer, thanks. I'd now like to invite up two speakers from our wonderful sponsor, Norton Rose Fulbright, Sarah and Kieran.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Claire and Saylesh, for those opening remarks and welcome. Saylesh, your inspiring comments and calming presence have really set the stage well for this evening's discussion, which I'm very much looking forward to. My name is Kieran Siddall. I'm the office managing partner here at Norton Rose Fulbright's Vancouver office, and I would also like to add our warm welcome to you all. For those joining us here in person and for those on Zoom. It's hard to believe, as Claire was saying, that it was 2019 when we were last here in person. Time does fly in many respects. It's great to be back. Here at Norton Rose Fulbright, we sincerely value our partnership with Pride at Work Canada. It is an important piece of our overall commitment to diversity, equality, and inclusion at the firm and in the community. We're excited to be joined today alongside like-minded people who are all committed to creating a workplace that celebrates diversity, gender expression, identity, and sexual orientation. Now I'm going to turn the microphone over to my colleague, Sarah, who leads our Vancouver Pride network at the firm.
Thanks, Kieran. Hi, everybody. I've met some of you already, and I hope to meet more of you later. My name is Sarah McKella. I'm a senior associate here at the firm, and I'm also the head or leader of our Vancouver Pride network. That is what we call our ERG, and many of you also have employee resource groups. So that's what we call ours here. This year, we're actually celebrating our 10th year anniversary, so there's extra reasons to celebrate for us. In the last decade, there's been a lot of change, as those of you who are working in this area know. Here, we've reviewed policies, we've looked at community building, and we've done community relationships and partnerships in our offices across the country. And a part of that is working with Pride at Work and with other people who are also working in this space and making these changes and trying to make our spaces more inclusive. So it's always exciting to get together with you all and with Pride at Work and to learn. And I've already learned things today. So thank you very much for your introductory comments. And I'm hoping to get more great ideas and best practices out of today. So thank you for joining us in our space, and happy Pride.
All right, let's get started with this panel. So I'm going to introduce you to our moderator. That is, I can already see you laughing and smiling. You're in for a great panel. People are getting hyped. So Sandeep Nair, they, is the Manager of Business Development at Pride at Work Canada. Sandeep holds a bachelor degree in communication and journalism and a diploma in 2D and 3D animation and graphic design. With over 12 years of work experience, Sandeep has worked as EDI program consultant, and prior to that, worked for a communication agency. Experience in project management and creative development, he worked on various projects ranging from websites, online communication to product packaging deliverables, with a core belief that everybody has a special responsibility for making a positive difference. Sandeep's work focuses largely on creating an inclusive workplace environment for all, especially the 2S LGBTQ community and people with disabilities. Sandeep has led programs and campaigns and provided training and consulting services to drive EDI strategy across various organizations in the Asian region. He has played a key role in developing 3 research publications to achieve success in creating a safe and inclusive society. Sandeep is on the board of Nanaimo Pride Society and the BC Society for Intercultural Education, Research, and Training. Sandeep, come on up. The second panelist is Saylesh. So if you want to take a seat, I'm not going to read your intro again. You can just take a seat. You're off. Folks need water. Maybe if someone could just toss some water up there, that'd be great. Thank you. Our next contestant is Basia, PhD, she, her, Senior Research Associate, Social Research and Demonstration Corporation. Dr. Pakula is a queer immigrant settler on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Over 15 years of experience in the planning, monitoring, and evaluation of social programs and policy initiatives. She has dedicated her career to building greater equity across employment, health, and other sectors through improved evidence. She's led and published research on the economic, health, and social inequities faced by the LGBTQ2S individuals in Canada. Welcome. Okay, last one. This is Tara Robertson. She, her, principal at Tara Robertson Consulting Inc. Tara is an intersectional feminist who uses data and research to advocate for equality and inclusion. She brings nearly 15 years experience to leading change in open source technology communities and corporate spaces, including 3 years leading diversity and inclusion at Mozilla. As a consultant, she partners with corporate leaders to help drive systemic change. As a leadership coach, she helps women of color in corporate careers go from underestimated and overworked to unapologetic and wildly successful. Let's go!
Thank you. Yes, hello, welcome everyone for being part of today's panel discussion. I want to delve into the discussion because I'm sure all of us are waiting to hear from all of you wonderful people. First question is to 3 panelists, all the 3 of you. So as we transition into the new phase of pandemic, we have certainly seen challenges to keep us safer while we are also providing space for connection. So we know that the pandemic has created some unique challenges, specifically for the 2S LGBTQI plus employees and job seekers. So could you each speak to one challenge that you have seen that is specific to the 2S LGBTQ plus community? So Saylesh, why don't you start first?
I ran through this with one of my colleagues. I say.
Do you want somebody else to take it or are you?
No, oh goodness, it's hard to pinpoint one challenge. I mean, and it's you know, it's very nice to hone in on the 2S LGBTQIA or whatever the acronym is. But it because it's a challenge for everyone. We're all in it together. Nobody's, you know, got a free ride. But I guess for our 2S LGBTQ, one challenge is that vulnerability. You know, we're already vulnerable, and it takes superpowered people to be vulnerable, super courageous people to be vulnerable. And so we've had to up the ante. And I don't know, I guess it's something that I think we're going to come out ahead on because we know how to be vulnerable, even though it doesn't feel like it. And that's the challenge. It feels like we're still in the margins. It feels like we're still the most vulnerable. It feels like that connection and that acceptance, that inclusion is that much more far-reaching because we've been isolated. And we wonder, is it sincere when we're trying to connect virtually? You know, we wonder, are we going to have our jobs when this is over? right? And we see how heteronormativity divides and excludes all too well. And so it's very scary. It's very scary to be uncertain in such uncertain times. And I just think that challenge of bravery and courage have to compel us to believe that we're going to come out fine.
Sure.
I'm going to risk sounding like a researcher, which I am, and talk to you a lot about research and evidence. But just as Saylesh was saying, we know the pandemic has further deepened inequities and those vulnerabilities that were already there. And during the pandemic, EGAL did some research where they found that our communities were facing impacts that were disproportionate to other communities, such as impacts on household income, mental health, and employment, including things like greater rates of layoffs. And this was particularly the case for racialized members of our communities. And so these are communities that are already vulnerable. And so now if you've been laid off, or if you're looking for a job, you may be finding yourself in a situation where you're just choosing a job because you need to make ends meet, even if it's unsafe. So that's one side of the story. But some of the research we've done, we've talked to queer and trans folks across the country, and we also found that there were some unexpected positives or opportunities or possibilities that came out during the pandemic as a result of moving to virtual environments that had to do with navigating safety. And particularly trans and non-binary folks talked about a host of things that they were able to do now in virtual environments that made them safer. So for example, use of personal bathrooms, not feeling the pressure to conform to certain dress codes, being able to freely display your pronoun, your preferred name on Zoom. That kind of became the thing everybody did. That wasn't the case prior. As well, just generally, everyone we spoke to talked about navigating safety in virtual environments when speaking, interacting with colleagues, which previously would be very difficult, a lot of microaggressions. How are you going to respond to this comment, this slide? This just, there was like an additional level of control that people talked about having in virtual environments. And this is an important kind of unexpected positive that people gained as a way of navigating their identities in the workplace. And so looking forward, coming out of the pandemic, we're talking about resilience or resurgence. I think that's one thing to really keep in mind as we move into more in-person and hybrid environments, is that for some people, there could be that sense of loss or increased anxiety, that safety that they've gained. And how do we kind of maintain and continue building some of these safe environments that we found? And again, that's not for everybody, but there's some interesting lessons out of research that I wanted to share with you today as part of this introduction.
Thank you so much.
So I'm going to kind of build on the positives. There's there's a couple of studies that have come out looking at going back into like an in-person workplace, and some people don't want to go. Queer and trans folks, people of color, women of color, and people with disabilities, not everyone, but on the whole, are preferring a hybrid or a virtual work environment because different things, like you mentioned the microaggressions, not having to deal with that kind of shit.
Can we just say it's not microaggressions, the aggressions?
Yeah, workplace violence, yeah. AKA microaggressions. Yeah. And if those things do happen, you're in your home. So you can take care of yourself in a different way. Like my wife and I have been working in a loft apartment. And the first couple of weeks, I was like, this isn't going to work. But it's been actually really awesome to witness each other and be witnessed in the work that we do. And, you know, you come out of a bad meeting sometime and it's like, we can hear, like, it's like, what's going on? And you've got your person there to support you. So there's a lot of benefits there. So I don't want us to see us lose those things. And kind of with the Great Resignation that's going on, even with a recession, people expect flexibility. So employers that aren't willing to be flexible are going to lose out on great talent.
Thank you. Thank you so much for actually driving that aspect of the challenge being not losing what is already what we have, and looking at that as an aspect of, that could be a challenge, not losing what is also positive right now. So Basia, I want to ask you to put on your researcher hat again. So Pride Over Canada did support the research that SRDC recently completed on the social, economic, and health inequities, specifically for the 2SLGBTQ+ community, right? So what are the major economic inequities that came out of the research, even within the 2SLGBTQ+ community, that you hope employers take into account in the future?
Yeah, really happy to. I will, again, sound like a researcher. I'm a very fun person. And researchers
are fun too.
So the research you mentioned was a multi-phase project. We've conducted it over 2 years. It was a partnership between Pride at Work Canada, Labour Market Information Council, and Dr. Sean Waite at Western. It was funded by Wage. And we did a host of things over the 2 years. So we talked to experts in the field. We did literature, comprehensive literature review, data scan. We looked at 14 years of data on income, and we've talked to folks across the country in interviews and focus groups. So it's a very comprehensive endeavor, and we try to look at these issues from a whole different angles. And so what we found are inequities across the board, and I will highlight kind of 3 areas. And the first is before people even get a job. So how you navigate your career and how you access employment. There's significant barriers that people face. And what we found in particular is that certain industries, professions, sectors, and regions are just found not to be safe for people. So there are just some people are missing out on opportunities because those jobs, careers are not accessible for them, or they may be choosing not to pursue them, even when they're looking at educational programs or training programs, because they know that they're going to be facing discrimination and violence, as you said. So these decisions are very daunting for people. We've heard that people put a tremendous amount of effort, time. Maybe some of you have faced this, researching who is a safe employer, who is a welcoming employer, and it is daunting. It is very difficult, in particular, when you look at a job application and you try to decide, what am I walking into? And so people are faced with this decision whether to disclose during applications as a way of gauging safety. But of course, that opens them up to discrimination, opens them up to a lowball offer. And in fact, we heard this from people. They said everything was going well. I went to the interview and I was trying to sort through this. And then suddenly my job was, what they thought would be a job offer was gone. It was just linked to my disclosure. So that's one thing. Then the second piece of inequities happen on the job discrimination day to day, slight slurs. We've heard people are refused to work with by their coworkers, a lot of misgendering, dead naming that happens routinely, things like that just, I'll mention another one because this really came up for our bisexual women participants who said highly sexualized comments from coworkers, supervisors, clients were very common, all really making up for this very kind of unsafe work environment. And so because of these experiences, people have told us in interviews and focus groups that they tended to withdraw from workplace interactions because they were alienating and they were unsafe. But of course, what then happened is that they would be perceived as not a team player. And that then meant they were not given that opportunity, that advancement opportunity or a promotion opportunity. And so this is really kind of a range of experiences that altogether combine for these very precarious work situations for folks. And now the third area, so what I'm describing may seem like anecdotes or stories that people tell, but what we've also done is we've looked at income data over 14 years from population health surveys, including tax data. And what we found are some significant disparities in earnings. So to give you an example, bisexual identified men and women reported incomes just about half of what heterosexual men report. So about 25,000 to 30,000 a year to just about 55,000 a year that heterosexual men report. So what it seems to signal is that these experiences that I was describing, they add and compound over one's career trajectory into lower incomes. So for example, we heard again stories, but this seems to be panning out in quantitative, in numbers, is people taking pay cuts to leave an industry altogether, or because they know that employer is safe, or people just having just one job offer and saying, I'm not going to negotiate. I think this is a lowball offer, but I'm too scared to negotiate. So these types of things. Of course, there's a tremendous amount of diversity in the community. I'm kind of painting it with one brush, but that cannot be forgotten. But what, I'll just wrap up by saying that we also heard a lot of suggestions that people had for things that can improve the situation. And this is not just what employers can do, but governments as well. But things like transparent pay scales, real commitment to safe workplaces, inclusion, things like benefits that reflect the lives of queer and trans families and communities. Those are some of the things we heard are kind of beginning steps to address some of the issues. So, yeah.
Thank you. One other thing that I wanted to also highlight about the research, which our executive director Colin mentioned during one of our talks, was there is a misconception that usually people have that the queer couples are usually very affluent because they think if it's a same-sex couple, then it's 2 salaries and no kids. But one of the things I want to break here is that misconception, because me and my partner, we are working individuals. We both have 2 salaries, but we are adopting a child. So I'm meeting my child tomorrow for the first time. So that would basically mean salaries, but we also have a kid. So that is a misconception I want to break right here to all of you. So that is something that I thought also came up with the research. Thank you so
Congratulations.
much. Thank you. Sarah, I think the next question is going to be very important for us, because all employees, because we are, I think, getting into a phase where we're getting into a hybrid environment. So you have done a lot of wonderful work in terms of digital accessibility. So could you speak on how to make more accessible spaces, specifically in this context for 2S LGBTQ+ employees with disabilities in a hybrid environment when you're going forward?
Yeah. Have you heard of the social model of disability before? So the medical model is one way of viewing disability, where a doctor might give a diagnosis or whatever, and that person could be like, I have this disability, I'm blind or whatever. The social model is the decisions that we make in our environments, our built environments, our digital environments, that can disable people. So some people with disabilities are like, I'm not disabled, but the environment disables me. So when we have websites that are not accessible to screen reader technology, so images aren't described, they're just the image. So if you can't see it, or you're using a technology where you can't see it, you don't get that information. Or you're trying to navigate that website using just the keyboard, and you can't get to through the menus, or you can't submit a form. Like, that website is, there's actually a barrier. You're being disabled. And we're using so many technologies online now. So there's a lot of, like, there's some good things. Like, most of us are using Zoom. If you're using Microsoft Teams, I'm sorry. My condolences, but there's some cool plugins, like Otter AI can do automatic transcription, which is pretty good. Having a professional CART transcriber, like someone who's got a court reporting background, who's actually transcribing what you're saying, there's not a lot of those people, and they're very expensive. So having that plugin can provide a fairly accurate transcript of a meeting. So that can provide communication access for someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, but also for people who are like have a visual preference, where you get information and process that more easily kind of through your eyes versus your ears. So there's lots of different decisions that we make every day about the tools that we use, how we use them, and how we collaborate together that can either include people or disable them and leave them out. And according to the World Bank, 15% of the population in the world has a disability. So that's a lot of people. And a lot of the disabilities that people have are invisible. So we don't even know. And there's a lot of queer, trans, and non-binary folks who have disabilities. So we need to be really intentional and make design choices that include people rather than create barriers that leave them out.
So much. I really love the aspect that you said about visual element, because I think we need to also consider an aspect of intersectionality. Like one of the things would be language, accent. For me, I'm somebody who still watches English movies with subtitles because sometimes I don't get the accents, the way they speak. So that's very important for us. So just think of it that way. It is something that we need to consider for everyone. So it is not just people with disabilities, right? So thank you so much. Saylesh, for me, the next question would be specifically about the Indigenous people. So for that, over the pandemic, we have seen greater awareness of the histories faced by Indigenous communities, but we know that awareness doesn't always lead to action. So what actions do you hope that settler employers can take to make a more, I would say, more welcoming space for all Indigenous people, but which also includes the Two-Spirit and LGBTQ+ individuals as well?
I guess I would point that in a way that prioritizes the 2S people first. And that they are aware and clear about what Two-Spirit means, because it is something that is problematic. It can be easily hijacked, and it can be used in a way that can seem like or actually be appropriation. And so if you are careful and selective and intentional about going to them first, and that's iffy. How do you do that without, asking them to come out? It's a presumptuous thing, but at the same time, I guess we can always keep that in the back of our mind to try. And it's beautiful to think about the option and the opportunities of what a virtual world can do, right, for inclusion. However, it's still problematic because at the same time, our youth today, that's all they know. This is foreign to a lot of them, and I think about my own family, my elders, for instance. That world of virtual reality isn't something that isn't just inaccessible. It's foreign to them, and it jars them to be forced to go onto Zoom or to Teams, and so holding their hand and walking them through as inclusive as that, as it may be or seem, it really isn't to them. And so we have to find good ways to bridge spirit and science. I'm not certain how else to say it. And you talk about disabilities, right? And so and it's wonderful that we have good people that can speak to and for anyone who's disabled or trans or whatever it is that may be, but I only know how to speak from. I've never known or had the privilege to speak to. And so that idea of bringing people together in ways that are meaningful and sincere is so hard to do. It's so hard to do when there is this tension that isn't any of ours, I would hope. I'm going to give all of you the benefit of the doubt, that you are allies, that you are working towards allyship. That term is loaded and problematic itself, but I would just want to give people, anyone I meet, and see the benefit of the doubt that we are on this mission to be better, and that we're on this mission to do better, right? And that we're not going to leave anybody out. And so a lot of my own people are finding their way from despair, trauma, violence, while being disabled by the language of English. And so, for instance, I opened this in a very rudimentary way. I don't speak my language, which in my mind and in my heart is a disability. It wasn't something that, you know, I chose or opted out of. I just didn't get that option because my elders were forced to leave it and bury it or have their tongues cut out. And so my tongueless spirit is doing what it can to find other ways to communicate, other ways to connect, other ways to bridge the gaps between the misunderstood and the understood. You know, I think a lot of people are lost in the barrens of their own minds when it comes to reconciliation, when it comes to understanding, when it comes to connection, because they, you know, a lot of us will go into these headspaces of thinking like, what do they want? And I'm talking about everyone. My elders, they say things like that, you know, what do these white people want? They've got everything. And yet the white people they're talking about will say the same thing. What do these Indians want? You know, they've got everything. And so it's you know, that's very much a real dialogue that continues to happen, that, you know, a lot of us who have become aware that we're more than our race, we're more than our gender, we're more than our sexual identity, you know, that we're whole human beings, we're whole spirits who are capable of painting a rainbow together, you know, and embracing diversity and not necessarily seeing disability as something that is othered. It's just a part of, you know, and where Indigenous people aren't in this section and non-Indigenous people aren't in this section, you know, we're coming to a place where we can walk where we will and say things in ways when we might have good intentions and they aren't necessarily received that way. So we say things in ways that are more thoughtful and have been groomed by the teachings of the first peoples of this land. So like, for instance, what I've done today, you know, I've gone into my whole self and I've shared some teachings with you. Now, what are you going to do with them? Are they going to stay here this night? And they're lovely and, you know, nice to hear, but are you actually going to take them and use them? And if you're afraid to, or if you're reluctant to, you know, hear it from me now, give her. Do it. Take risks and don't be afraid to make mistakes, especially if you have good intentions. You will have people like me who will correct you and who will teach you and who will continue to, I mean, you know, I can't speak for all other Indigenous people, but I I will always aim to forgive. And so I hope that like these discussions that we're having, like I'm sort of weaving it together now with the two of you, help us to remember that, you know, diversity is beautiful, rainbows are beautiful, but at the same time, it's still one thing. A rainbow is one thing. We are one people, regardless of the differences and regardless of the abilities and disabilities, you know, and we are so blinded by what it means to be beautiful. We are so blinded by what it means to be passable. We are so blinded by what it means to be privileged that we forget that not everybody has any of those things. And they have to make it through this world. And if a virtual reality is the only way they can do it, wonderful. But the point is that, you know, I think we need to be able to do that in person. I think we need to, you know, continue learning how to walk together and talk together and laugh together in person with all of our differences, with all of our ways of being, and with all circumstances that we each bring to the table. And so these, you know, beautiful conversations can continue to show really how similar we are.
So to continue the conversation, I mean, if you leave it to me, I can keep talking to them. I want to open up to the audience if you have any questions. There's no mics because it's all mic, so you can just talk. Yes.
In the effort of inclusion, I think there's the risk of asking people to self-identify in a way that can be outing or uncomfortable. I guess, would you talk a little bit on that, on methods we can use to be inclusive without asking people to out themselves or other themselves in any way?
So is it directed to any of the speakers? Or?
Yeah, I think Tara, you probably have thoughts on that, right?
Yeah. I have thoughts and opinions on lots of things. So I work mostly with US companies, and in the US, because there's a different history, most organizations have demographic data. So in Canada, I hear from a lot of organizations, we care a lot about this. And I'm like, great, what is your representation percentage? And they're like, we don't actually know. So I think in Canada, we're seeing some work happening at the provincial level around, there's a committee around anti-racism and data and collection, how we do that in a good way and how we do that in a respectful way and how we honor privacy in that. But like the best practice is to be doing employee engagement surveys and then cutting the survey by the data. Like, what do men think versus women and non-binary folks? Or what's Black employees' experience versus Asian employees' experience versus white employees' experience? And for me as a DEI kind of leader, I want to see where there's gaps. Like, I want to know where a group is having a really different experience. And then I want to get really curious about that. So for me, I think about like a longer kind of view of collecting data and using it to diagnose inclusion issues. Not like looking around a room of 8 people and being like, so what is your blah, blah, blah. Like, that's never one-on-one in a conversation that people want to share that's great. But it's when you have the data, you can do interesting things with surveys to really surface where the issues are and then tackle the areas where the gaps are the biggest. So one organization I worked with, looking at the engineering part of this tech company, women on the question around, I feel safe to report harassment and bullying and other unwanted behaviors, women's responses were 30% lower than men's. Like, what's going on there? Like, if you don't feel safe, like physically safe at work, or you feel like you're going to be bullied or harassed, like you're not going to be like looking over your shoulder. You're not going to feel safe to do great work. You're not going to feel safe to take risks and to do kind of the innovative tech work that this company was there to do. So surfacing that, like working with the leaders to be like, okay, this is what we see. What do you want to do about it? Like I can go and do focus groups and talk to people to find out why. I've got some ideas why I think, but I want to go find out why, and then let's target our solutions on that. And without data, you can't do any of that. You're just kind of guessing. You're like, well, I think, and we can do better than that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions?
I have a question about your research. So were there any sort of outliers or things that kind of drew your attention that were maybe things that we can look to as a different path, or, you know, what can we do to kind of fix this? Like, did you see any evidence from your research that kind of pointed you in a direction?
I think that's a really good question. You know, I think we're here to talk about employment, and obviously the research I've talked about has to do with the labor market experiences of our communities. But the reality is that we're full human beings. You know, Saylesh talked about mental health, Tara talked about disabilities, and you cannot separate these things out. People's lives interact in different spheres. So we cannot separate the experiences of people in employment from, say, our community's access to safe and affirming healthcare or access to affordable housing. You cannot separate these things out. And in fact, you know, again, to tell a story, but this is not an isolated story. You know, we talked about a man who was kicked out of his house as a youth by his parents when he came out, and he talked about his entire journey in employment in his life. And it was so shaped by that experience, this feeling of, I do not ever want to experience this precarity again. I do not want to feel this alienation again. And so this is the reality of people's lives. You know, you may be going to work, but you may have just been on public transit and have faced violence, and you show up to work, or somebody threw slurs at you, and you're at work. Your employer doesn't know it. Your colleagues may not know it. If you're an employer or an ally or colleague, you know, the person next to you may be struggling to find housing with their spouse because they're continuously facing this discrimination, or, you know, a lot of things, particularly when it comes to mental health. So we're talking about employment, but the solutions have to be holistic. They have to look at all of these things, and they go beyond just the employer. They go much upstream than that. So that's kind of probably my message from the research, is that we need to look at things much more broadly, and really look at people's whole lives, and how they're impacted, how their employment journeys, trajectories are shaped by all these other experiences, including early in life and over the course of their lives. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And I think it's very important for us as professionals, as employers, to understand that people who we work with would probably have had a certain lived experience that they carry on as an individual. And that is something that they bring to their work as well. We should not forget about that. It's not just about who they are today, but also what they have experienced before. So that's something, again, to add. I would say I am someone who's still fighting depression because of my personal, lived experience as a gay man in India, where it was still a very illegal context in India until 2018 to be gay. You were criminalized because of the act. So that's a lived experience I bring in, and which is something I will be carrying on for the rest of my life as an individual. So that is something we should not let go. Or understand that there is probably an individual sitting next to you at your place who probably has had a different lived experience than yourself. And understanding that and making sure that person also feels safe, respected, valued, and seen. So yes, so unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. This has been a wonderful conversation. And with keeping the theme of what Claire started off together again, I really hope that all of us can come back again together to have a wonderful conversation, probably on another important and a beautiful topic. So with that, thank you so much for being part of today's session. It was wonderful. And yes, we will continue these conversations even after the panel today at the Networking the Sky Garden. So I'm hoping to talk with all of you some more. So thank you.
Can I offer one thing?
Yes, yes.
Saylesh, when you're talking about like being like dropping from our head into our heart, like that really moved me, and like kind of I was like, wow, like, and this is the first time I've been in person with strangers in 2.5 years. Like I've even got an underwire bra. But this is such a beautiful experience. So like one of the questions that I've been using in meetings this week are like, tell me about your dreams for the rest of the year. Like, let's not waste this time together with silly small talk and the weather and, oh, what's coming up this weekend? Like, let's be real with each other. And you invited us to come into our hearts. Like, let's connect from that place. Sorry.
And still rock pride.
Yeah.
I might Claire.
Well, I thought we would do a round of applause for the panel. Yeah. Are we getting you to clap for me? So thank you so much for our panelists. I just enjoyed that conversation so much. So Saylesh, thank you so much. Basia, Tara, and also Sandeep, thank you so much for giving us so much in that panel discussion. And I am really excited to be human together in this next portion of the networking session and contributing to more visits to happiness. I also want to thank our sponsors, Norton Rose Fulbright. Thank you so much. Sarah, Kieran, I don't see you more in the room. Oh, there you are. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Round of applause. You have to clap for yourselves, the best people in the room and on the audience in the Zoom. Yeah. You do want to relive the magic or share with your colleagues what we've talked about today. These sessions will be posted online for your viewing pleasure. As Sandeep mentioned, we will now be enjoying the food and beverage portion of the evening in the Sky Garden. Unfortunately, online, sorry, can't send you that. But we will be chatting amongst ourselves, sharing our dreams. My current dream for the rest of the year is try to move to Berlin for a new job. So manifesting that a little bit. Yeah. And yeah, if you want to join us for more of our ProPride events or other Pride events online, please check out our website, prideatwork.ca. And thanks everyone for coming. Did forget, sorry, Saylesh, you will be closing our session.
Yes,
thank you.
I can do it actually from here. I guess just to follow up and close it with a clean bang. I just have to say that, you know, like I'm certain all of you understand the notion and have experienced the idea of what a top-heavy organization is, right? And in speaking to the question that you had earlier about how do we include or invite people to come out or to come in, you know, whatever that it is, you know, it's not so simple as asking, you know, or assuming or anything like that, but declaring that your organization is safe and inclusive, but you can only do that if you actually are. And so I use the term top heavy because, you know, I've worked for many top heavy organizations where, you know, it's very cis, heterosexual, usually white males. And so, you know, for them to say that they're inclusive means that they put a rainbow sticker here and they you know, I don't know, I have a gay nephew or something like that, you know, but they it doesn't necessarily mean that they reach the destination. And reaching that destination means that they have been able to see themselves as vulnerable and imperfect as the rest of us. Life knocks them down, life humbles them and helps them to realize that they are not superior, you know, and that we're looking at it from the ground up and from the sides in, and just declaring that, you know, I don't know how to be sincere other than to give it a go. And to be able to say things like, we foster and offer sanctuary to any of our employees on any spectrum. And therefore, we find ways to adapt their environment that helps them to feel just as empowered as anyone else at the top. You know, like I personally will go into a situation, a new position, I don't know, anything like that. And I'm pretty quick to find my way out so that people know who I am, why I am, fill in the blanks, right? And with hopes of not isolating and differentiating myself from everyone, but with hopes of connecting, with hopes of showing the people and employer and the, you know, colleagues that we're all one and the same. And to help them normalize how they see someone like me so that they're not, so that it's just a boring thing. You know, like, you know, where we can actually sit down and talk about the weather, because that's how boring we can be together. I guess that's a good way of putting it. Learning how to be boring together, you know, and so that you know that you're breathing easily, you know that you can actually sit down and maybe even take a nap beside that person and you feel safe to do so, you know. So with that, I just close with the idea of let's among. That's what my district uses. It's my own language, and it means one heart and one mind. And so, you know, it's beautiful that we can have gatherings like this to talk about what it means to be inclusive and to be kind, not violent, you know, and but it's another thing to really be those things. And how do you trust that? How do you know that you're amongst that? How do you know that you've got people on your side, people that can stand behind you and you know they're not going to stab you, but they're actually going to truly have your back. And, you know, there can be endeavors to take your marginalized folk in clever ways, meaningful ways of creating them as leaders. You know, so that those people who have never known privilege can teach the privileged what it means to be humble, what it means to be human in the most imperfect ways. And so I hope that those closing remarks continue to sit in your heart and continue to silence the agony and the anxiety and the dark voices in your head that tell you you can't, you know, and help you to realize that all of us can, and all of us are capable of figuring out how to make a virtual world real, you know, so that our young people actually do know what it means to sit in person like this with one another. You know, they are disabled by technology, and you know, that's an issue that is ironic, right? Because a lot of them, they can't function in person. So it's safer for them to be behind a device, you know, and if there are people that have all sorts of backgrounds and experiences that make them anxious and despair all too easily, you know, there are very good ways to help them be like this, connect with each other just by demonstrating it. And letting them know that it isn't easy, even, you know, for the ones like us who are used to this. It doesn't mean it's easy. We carry the burden well, but it doesn't mean it isn't heavy. So I hope you all sleep well. I wish you all migraine-free Sundays. What's tomorrow? Friday?
We just want to give you a little gift here as well, Saylesh. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. This is for real the end. Yeah, thanks all for coming. There will be food, beverages outside in the Sky Garden. People will be directing you. Yeah, thanks so much for coming. Thanks everyone. Thank you.